How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about Heavy Metal number 304. I've been reading this magazine for a bit, and I thought, hey, why am I not covering it on here? Why am I not reviewing it? So I decided to go ahead and cover the newest issue of this book. So this is covering the most recent issue of the magazine. It is fairly new. So you get the Heavy Metal logo. It's transparent, and you can see the fortress. And you get this guy using horses to drag this dragon he slayed back to his castle. A really fun cover. I don't think it actually happens in the story, but it's still fun. Open up the book, and the first thing we see, Heavy Metal is now monthly. So that's pretty cool. And then we flip to the table of contents, where you can see all the stories and the credits to who wrote and draw them. Now, I'm going to be covering the stories. I'm not going to do any major spoilers, but I do want to say my piece on a few plot points and make sure you have a basic understanding as to what the story is about. But also, that being said, I'm not going to cover the serials that aren't in part 1. So, Maiden Chapter 3, Funeral Chapter 3, Last Detective Chapter 2, which even though it's Chapter 2, I think that's actually the last one there. So I'm going to be skipping over those for the sake of time, but we still do have quite a bit. So let's go ahead and look at the stories. And I guess before we jump in, there's the alternate cover with Tarna on it. So that's always cool, the Tarna covers. So that's B cover right there. Anyway, first one is the continuation of a serial. So we're going to jump into story 2, Azaralf, and you get this soldier wandering through a war-torn land, and it's all in this really cool black and white, solid black and solid white. That's really, really fun and great art there, very crisp. The soldier's wandering through, and kind of oblivious to everything that's going on, there's this couple, a man and a woman, reading the stars. And, of course, the soldier and these two have very different paths that they're on, and they will come into contact with each other in a very interesting way. But let's not spoil that for you. After that, we have the story Backup. And in Backup, you have this lady who has invented an AI there and is playing Battleship with it. And they're friends, but they explain, she explains that when they get back to Earth, she's going to have to turn him off for a little bit because he's an unregistered AI, and she says, I'll bring you back, but it'll kind of be like dying, and it goes, dying? What's that? I don't know what dying is. Well, turns out their ship is about to get struck by something, and that is not going to be good for them. And quite quickly, things get dire. Now, the robot didn't know much about dying before, but they're put in quite a pickle there, and it might wind up learning more about dying than it wants to. So, pretty cool and interesting story. I really liked the mother-son relationship between her and the robot, and it does talk about some interesting things there, and actually does get quite a few pages to breathe. After that, another one of the serial stories, and then we move on to Between Life and Death, the art of Gideon Kendall, an interview by Joshua Skye, and you get to see this guy's art. It's pretty cool and funny. This guy looking into the deep fryer, and you see he's a Cyclops, so that's pretty cool. And then you get this this red eye monster with a horn, and it's got a bunch of babies flying out of its back, and some nice little flowers there. So cool, fun, cartoony art with a interview to go with it to find out more about the art. Anyway, moving along, we get a 2-page story about Santa and the Elves, which it's kind of odd that this is not a Christmas issue, but whatever. And this is only 2 pages, so it's really hard not to spoil. But not Santa, but one of the elves is telling the story to all the other elves, a bedtime story, and they're like, "Where's Santa? Oh, he's working in his shop. Oh, we don't believe you." And well, there's a reason. Santa's not really working in his shop. He's fighting an ice dragon, and there's some polar bears behind him, which I'm not sure if the polar bears are with him or if he's gonna have to fight those too. But yeah, Santa fighting an ice dragon. It's only 2 pages. It's a really cool concept. It's like, hey, Santa's a fantasy character too, you know? So short but really fun, and hey, why not have it? Up next, the story A Perfect Memory. This guy's talking about his good childhood memory. He's at the pool with his dad. Everything's really good. But then he talks about a bad childhood memory when his dad left him and he, doesn't quite understand and is upset by it. And you see in the future, you can hook yourself up to technology and meditate, and in turn, change the memories you have to what you'd rather they be. But of course, this interferes with his current life, and it talks about, living in the past and trying to have a perfect memory, but that's going to be very hard. Yeah, a perfect past. It's a really cool and deep story about memory. Is really cool and dark there, a really dark one. Up next, this story called Synapse, I believe. I can't show you too terribly much of this, but basically this lady gets mad that her husband had an affair, and she goes to this robot lady who YouTube won't like me showing you her. It's really not super graphic, but she's not wearing any clothes, so YouTube would get mad if I showed you that. So in turn, I'm pretty much just staying to this page for this story. But anyway, she goes to the robot lady who's plugged into all the data there, and she goes, "Oh, you want revenge on your husband? Well, I can, influence people, and I can manipulate data, and in turn, I can invent some completely untrue story and ruin your husband's life." And even though the concept of a robot lady doing this is kind of sci-fi fantasy, the idea that all your news stories may not be 100% true is, terrifyingly plausible concept, and the idea of how much can be manipulated. So maybe don't trust everything you hear right off the bat. A very potent lesson in that story. Anyway, Skyward Chapter 1. This is the beginning of a new serial. You get this villain here and some warriors of these fun different rainbow colors fighting in a time before time. Now, the end of the story, the end of the prologue here, we zoom in on this one purple warrior. So she charges in the time before time, but then we cut to now, and we find that she's your average 20-year-old girl. So she doesn't remember being a warrior in the time before time. And she has this thing where she's studying medicine. It's something she always did, and she's good at it, but she doesn't really like it, and she's upset that, her parents don't know she doesn't really like it. They get her a book on medicine for her birthday and leave her a nice note, but she's like, can't they figure out I don't really like medicine? And she actually throws the book away, but before she throws it away, she gives this line, "Ugh, science, swipe left forever," which is admittedly a really cringy line, but we'll move on from that. She's a lifeguard at this pool, and she's talking with her friend, and it's 108 degrees outside, which I live in Texas, and let me tell you, that does happen. I'm not sure where exactly this story's set, but yep, hot weather. Anyway, the moment she turns 20, she suddenly blanks out, falls in the pool, and quite strangely becomes super heavy. Now, why she's under she gets a vision of the time from the prologue. Really cool, trippy sci-fi stuff. And she wakes up not really understanding or knowing what happened. They eventually got her out of the pool, though. But we see the other warriors from the prologue are scattered about the earth in this cool double-page spread, and we get to see a little bit of what each of them, what their lives are like, and their own different hobbies and skills. But basically, you see a little bit of their life, and then for some reason, the sound symbol, and then they turn and look. So I'm guessing they're saying a sound is happening. I don't know why they didn't use an onomatopoeia sound bubble like normal, but little sound box, a little sound symbol, and we get to see where all these girls are all over the world and what story may happen there. Up next, The Wizard's Curtain, which is a prose story, and it's put out by this company, Wonderwork, which I was wondering what they are, but it sounds like they do podcast stories. Heavy Middle is teaming up with them. Yeah, I was wondering what they were, but there was an ad for them earlier in the issue. And, yeah, Heavy Middle and Digga Studios stories from these authors. So, yeah, I guess this is a prose version of something you might hear in their podcast, wherever podcasts are available in the 21st century. But this story is about a man who's so far in the future that he's living his entire life virtually, and in turn, nothing he does really matters anymore, and he has a sense of, his whole life not mattering because literally nothing he does will affect anything because it's all virtual. And in turn, he spends his time virtually time traveling, sending his conscience to look at the downfall of ruthless dictators, and seeing what their empire crumbling was like in their eyes. A pretty interesting story, deep and philosophical, so that was pretty cool. And there's, of course, a subplot where his dreams are drawing him to one specific guy in the past, and he doesn't know what was up there. Anyway, after that, we get another 2-page story. You get this guy looking at this germ under a microscope. It jumps out, and he jumps out the window, and in turn you get a little bit of a zombie apocalypse there with this goo, this pink goo. And I won't spoil the second page for you, but it does have a fun twist at the end. After this, we have another serial story, and then the final story, Forgive Us Our Sins. You get a government lab, soldiers running in because something has gotten out, and it made this guy pour acid all over his face. Something is manipulating their minds, and they ask the guy what happened, and he says, oh, well, we had this baby here. We deprived it of any attention. We gave it isolation, and we thought it would die, but instead of dying, it felt it was a challenge and found new ways to use its brain. It developed psychic powers to reach the outside world, and now that it's finally gotten out, it's getting into people's heads and wreaking havoc. So a pretty cool story, a lot of stuff about the mind and, what people think. But overall, pretty cool story with a dark twist. But yeah, this issue of Heavy Middle was pretty fun. It's a sci-fi heavy issue and a lot of stories with cool dark twist, and if anything I described sounded cool to you, I'd recommend picking this up. I'll definitely be back for number 305. But anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You're really helping the channel out. I'll put a relevant playlist on the bottom if you want to see more. That should be my comic book playlist, and I did review the Tarna book, the Alex DeCampi one, so that's in there as well. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist on the bottom.